Okay, so I'm ready to remove the primary sprocket, but before I take this off, I want to rotate the motor counterclockwise to get the pistons down away from the valves, because later on I'm going to rotate the cams to release it from the cam bearing trays, and I don't want any obstructions when I do that. So the first thing I do is mark the sprocket to chain relationship so I don't have to guess which way it goes when I put it back. And the next thing I would do is remove the flywheel lock pin. So with a 22mm socket on the crankshaft and a breaker bar, I start at the thermostat housing on the outer groove here where the engine lifting bracket would go, and that's pretty much at 12 o'clock. So then I just rotate counterclockwise until I get to the outside of the cylinder head, and that drops the piston down about 16mm, or around 630 thousandths. Okay, so from here I want to remove the primary tensioner, and I'll throw a towel down here in case any oil comes out. So I got a 32mm socket here. Okay, so there's the tensioner. So I have a piece of string here to tie up the chain so it doesn't fall into the motor when I take the sprocket off. And just tie it up. A couple of half hitches. So you can tie it off to the car, or you can just let it fall down there. It really doesn't matter as long as the string is on it. So that's it for this part. Next we'll move on to removing the camshaft, and then we'll take it from there. Alright. Alright, so before I remove the cam, I just wanted to do a dry run here on how this is going to play out. What I'll do first is remove the timing blocks. And then what's going to happen next is I'm going to rotate this cam counterclockwise until number 1 cylinder cam lobes are facing straight down, which, by the way, this is E2 bearing cap, so it's E1 through E7 right to left. And also for reference, the bearing ledge is marked as an E as well, and the exhaust cam has an A A1 through A7, and the cam bearing ledge is also marked with an A. So what I'm going to do is rotate this cam counterclockwise until number 1 cylinder lobes are facing straight down. Now I don't just actually go by number 1 cylinder. What I actually go by is number 6 cylinder E7 bearing cap. So what I do is I rotate the cam so the lobes are in line with the bearing cap right in the center. And basically when you have that set up, then you know that your number 1 cylinder cam lobes are facing straight down. So after that, what I'll do is hold the cam with my wrench and break all the bearing caps loose all the way across up to E3. I'll skip over E2, leave that tight, and then I'll unscrew E1. Then take all the bearing caps off, and then what I'm going to do is crack E2 bearing cap nuts loose like a quarter turn at a time until it's almost all the way off, and then I'm going to rotate the cam just a hair to take a little pressure off the bearing cap so that they don't pop off. But I'm hoping you'll see that in the video when I mount the camera. So anyhow, that's the dry run. Alright. Okay, so I'm ready to pull this intake cam, and I've laid down some paper towel just in case one of the nuts gets loose for me. I also have someone holding the cam for me today to speed things up. Okay. Okay, this one's a little stuck. E1. Okay, so I'm just going to go 1/4 inch at a time here, or a 1/4 turn, I mean. I'll take over. Thank you. Okay, I have a few threads left here, so I'm going to rotate the cam until a little tension's taken off. And the cam is just going to sit where it wants to when you do rotate it. Dropped one down there. Okay, so that's it. Just pull your cam out. So to do the other side, if you're going to do the exhaust, it's the same procedure, and just work your way across and take it out the same way. Alright. Alright, next, to get this bearing ledge out with the lifters, my technique is to use earth magnets, and these are the button cell type. I have 12 of these. I've already laid 8 of them down, so I'll continue with the rest now. And I just put them smack dab in the center of the lifter. Then I take a welder's brazing rod. This one's cut to length, and it's laid over the top here. Then pull the cam tray out. And that's it. Okay, so I thought I'd take a moment and go over these INA lifters that we picked up for this project. Some people ask, are the lifters pumped up from the factory? And yes, the lifter is pre-primed and pumped up, and you can't compress that lifter into its bore. So they are solid filling. Also, INA is the original manufacturer for these lifters. And they are filled up with what looks like a mineral oil, and they do leak out a little bit during shipping, so you might want to be prepared for that. So when you do first fire these things up with a new lifter, it's a good idea to put in 530 weight oil so the oil can get into the lifter quickly. And also you want to put some MALDI lube, engine assembly lube, on top of the lifter and the camshaft, just like you would with the old Ford and Chevy flat tabbet motors. Except with these type of overhead cam lifters, you don't have to break them in at 2000 RPM for 30 minutes. With these you can just start it up and let it idle. It doesn't hurt to bring the idle or the RPMs up to about 1500 RPMs just to get that oil pressure up and get the oil up to the top of the motor. But from there you can let it idle. So that's about it. Alright. So I thought I'd show you a technique I use to fill up my lifters with oil, especially when I get new ones. What I use is a vacuum pump, and what I'll do is put in a couple of lifters at a time. There we go. and I'll add some oil to it just until it's over the lifters. And I'm using Cam's braking oil. It's not necessary. You can use any oil you want. So when I apply vacuum to it, the air will come out and the oil will go into the lifters. And it works pretty well doing it this way. You can fill them using other methods, but this works pretty well for me, so that's how I do it. Alright, that's about it. Just passing that on. Okay, for those of you that are curious as to how much lifter preload is created by these stock M50 camshafts, what I'm going to do is place the cam bearing ledge with a lifter in it on top of the cam heel. And take a measurement. So we have 200 thousandths with the lifter sitting against the heel of the cam. And we have 250 thousandths with the lifter resting at 0. So it's about 50 thousandths of lifter preload created by the camshaft. And that's it. Alright. Okay, I wanted to go over a problem that I've come across on these intake cams. On the number 2 journal, this oil feed hole shoots oil to the front of the cam through this little orifice, which feeds the Van Ness gear. And I've seen this thing plug up. So when I have these things out, I'll take my blowgun and blow this thing out and clean out that orifice. And if it's really plugged up, what I'll do is take a push pin and just ream it out, or not ream it out, but clean it out until my air can get through there. And brake cleaner works pretty well too if you shoot it through that orifice. And usually a lot of crud comes out of this oil feed hole when you do that. So this is something I've come across and wanted to share that. Alright. Alright, so I'm ready to put in this bearing ledge for the intake cam. And I just put some regular motor oil on the lifters before I dropped them in. And I also put some engine assembly lube on the bottom of the lifters where it contacts the valves. The only thing I can say to look out for when you're putting these on is to make sure that your locating dowels, which there's 2 of them, one here on the front of the head and one on the back of the head, that locate the bearing tray. You want to make sure they're not distorted, and also I always check to make sure there's no debris or anything that can bind the dowel when it's going on. And that's about it. From there I just drop it in. Okay, and then I pull the welding rod off. And I use needle nose pliers to pull the magnets. You could use suction cups to hold the lifters, That's what BMW does. Or just use magnets, whatever works for you. So I'll continue doing this, and then we'll move on to putting the cam in, and then we'll take it from there. Alright, so I'm ready to put that cam back in. I went ahead and put some bearing guard on the bearing surfaces. I used Clevite, and also I added some assembly lube to the top of these lifters since they're brand new, and it's like a moly base lube. So putting the camshaft in is pretty much the exact opposite of taking it out. Also, I have some assembly lube on the cam lobes here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start with bearing number 2. And also I put some Clevite bearing guard on this surface as well. You want to be careful not to get it on the mounting pads. You want to make sure those are nice and dry. So you might have to rotate the cam until you can get the bearing cap down below the threads. And we need at least a couple turns on this. Okay, once you have a couple threads on, the camshaft can be rotated just like before, so that number 1 lobes are facing straight down and number 6 lobes are facing straight up. Then we can go a quarter turn at a time until the bearing cap is flush to the bearing wedge. Alright, once it feels snug, I go ahead and put the rest of these caps on. Then I put all the nuts on and torque them down nice and snug, and then I'll come across and torque them down to 11 foot-pounds. And then after that, I rotate the cam back to top dead center and put the timing blocks back in. So I'll get all this torqued down, and then we'll come back and then take it from there. Alright. Alright, so I finished torquing the bearing caps down to 11 foot-pounds. And first I snugged them down evenly, and then I came across with 11 foot-pounds after that. So once that was done, I rotated the camshaft back to top dead center so that number 1 intake and exhaust lobes are facing each other. And then I put the timing blocks back in. So from here, we would rotate the crankshaft back to top dead center, but we have to wait for a little while for the lifters to bleed off because the camshaft created some lifter preload. And I photocopied the wait times from the Bentley manual. So it's around 68 Fahrenheit, 10 minutes, 50 to 68 Fahrenheit, 30 minutes, and 32 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit is 75 minutes. It's about 70 degrees where I'm at right now, and I'm going to go ahead and wait 20 minutes because I've preloaded a lifter at 80 degrees before, and it took 15 minutes for it to compress. So I have time, so I'm going to wait 20 minutes. And that's about it. So I'll wait and come back, and then we'll take it from there. Alright. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes, and by now all the lifters should have bled down and the valves should be closed. So I'm ready to rotate the crank back to top dead center. And before I do that, I'll put the exhaust sprocket back in. And I'll line up my original mark with the mark on the chain. Okay, there it is there. Okay, from here I'm going to rotate the crank clockwise until we get to top dead center. And I'm just going to put a little tension on the sprocket while I'm turning it. Okay, then I'll use my mirror to guide me and line up those marks. Okay, looks pretty close. Okay, so now what I'll do is put in my crank locking pin, or also known as the flywheel locking pin. And this is located underneath the starter, if I didn't mention that. On my website I have some pictures of it if you want to check them out. Okay, so that's it for this part. Alright, so we're back on top dead center, and we have our primary sprocket back in. And now's a good time to check the clocking of the sprocket to the camshaft holes. So if you grab your sprocket and rotate it counterclockwise until it stops, the camshaft holes will line up to just about center to the sprocket. So the starting point, if you rotate it clockwise, the exhaust camshaft holes are to the left of the elongated holes. And when we put our tensioner in, it'll end up close to center. So that's the proper setup for that.